think she's capable of empathy, remorse, or shame.
Today we're going to talk about Meghan Markle's family. And apparently there's a little dust up about some things they've done. And there's like a little documentary done about them over in Australia. And Greg found that. And Greg, why don't you tell us about the videos we're going to look at?
Yeah, quite simply, this is from Australia, Channel 7, and it's just about the Markles. Wonder why the timing is perfect just because coronation's coming on Saturday. We could call this one the royal in-laws. This would be a great one to look at. And this interview is with Meghan Markle's father, her stepsister, and her stepbrother. That's all we got.
Hey, talk about the neurological deficits they both have.
Yeah, I was going to do that before, but yeah, that's fine. Let's back up and do it, or you want me to just talk about it here?
Let's just talk about it here.
I'll be going through it throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, but one of the things that I think is important before we even turn the video on, the first video, is what Scott's talking about. One of them has MS, and she's had MS for most of her life and been in a wheelchair. And you'll see her hands drawn. You'll see a lot of things that are different about her communication style. And then the father has, in recent months or recent years, had a stroke. I think it's past 4 years. So you see that he is now impaired as well. So baseline, we talk about baseline all the time. Baseline is absolutely imperative with these two folks.
So we assume that because of the international press coverage, Meghan knows you've had a stroke.
Of course she has to know.
I'm taking it from that she hasn't called you.
No.
No phone call?
No.
How long has it been now?
It's been 4 years.
So just radio silence?
Exactly. If she doesn't turn up for a stroke, if that doesn't move her, what would?
There's a lot that's been lost already. And I grieve a lot. I mean, I've lost my father.
Dad didn't do anything. And it's just, she just woke up one day in a new world and decided that she doesn't have any family.
I believe she had a clear motive for writing family off because it would seemingly justify and perhaps delay the revelation of all of the lies that she had told the royal family.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, okay, so he does a double shrug, and that's going to be important later on to know that, given that he's had a stroke, he can still raise both shoulders, because if we don't know he can raise both shoulders, which the double shrug is usually a sense of, hey, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about that? If we thought that he couldn't do a double shrug, then all bets might be off on single shrugs, which can, often denote some indecision or some not knowing about something, or, you can get a single shrug in a moment of deception along with other clusters. So it's important. He can do a double shrug. He's able to indicate thaw as well. That's important as well. The thing that interests me a lot about this is Meghan in that talks about grief. I've lost my father, but instead of showing any grief, she does a head tilt and looks for the reaction of the person interviewing. Now, I only bring that up because we've done Meghan before, but understand throughout this documentary, this interview, it is carefully chosen what is being put in to show Meghan what is against the parents. So it's clear documentary making. They're trying to tell a specific story about these groups of people. But the most important thing about that is baseline of he can do a double shrug. It'll be important later on. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, a couple of things I like, Mark. First of all, let's talk about stroke. Stroke is unpredictable what it will do because it depends on the part of the brain it impacts. So if it impacted the part that controls muscles in his face, he's going to have trouble. If it impacts the part that controls a side, he's going to have trouble. But there's all kinds of things that can happen. One of the most odd I've ever heard is when when Hefner had a stroke, he lost the ability to read is the only reason he had a stroke. Really interesting. So it can affect the brain in different ways. So we can't blanketly say, well, he had a stroke, so he can't do X or Y. Mark, I appreciate you bringing that piece up. There's an interesting thing he does consistently here, and watch for it in him and in his children. That's single brow rise, and it's not related to stroke. One of the things that I always say is fish taste like what they swim in. And by that, I mean, if you nurture children a certain way, they're going to also behave that certain way. And a lot of times, whether it's biology or nurture, people will pick up the same traits. So we're going to watch and see that skepticism and condemning of one single eyebrow rise. We'll see it as we go through here, and we'll see it in more than one of these family members. Kind of interesting for that for me. He's adapting in that upright hand at the cane. He's releasing nervous energy for some reason. It's probably apprehension about what the question is going to be. He probably has no idea where this thing is going. And then we see that single brow rise. Meghan, when she's talking about losing her father, does that head bobble with narrowed eyes and a vocal fry. We've covered them in great detail in the Oprah interview, and you can find that in our videos. But this one, you can see that there's something going on in uncertainty about her wording there. Maybe she's defining what lost her father means. We don't know, but we know something's going on in her head. There's lots of reasons that family dysfunction can happen. We're going to hear a lot of reasons as things go through here, but there's clearly some of that. I'm not going to say these people are redneck, but I'm going to say they're on the spectrum. I'll just leave that right there. And as we go through, you make up your own mind how far on the spectrum. The sister is demonstrative with her face. Some of that could be MS because of the way you have to overcome some of the signals. But there's a discernible pattern. You see that brow rise. You see her jut her chin. You see her, when she juts her chin out, being emphatic with language at clear. She exposes her lower teeth. Whether it's true or not, what she says about Meghan, she believes it. That's all that matters. And I think that drama like this within families, and there's a dramatic age difference between them. I believe she was 16 when Meghan was born, and the brother was 14 when Meghan was born. So there's a dramatic age difference, but there's a ton of different reasons things can happen in families. Some people like drama, others don't. I would say drama is stranded intellectual capacity. If I got nothing to do with my time and you give me a reason to dwell on it, and then how it's expressed is based on social norms for that person. So Jerry Springer took advantage of the ones who had very weak social norms or very strong social norms. I would say, Mark, for example, the royal family may have some drama, but it would be very poorly expressed. There wouldn't be a whole lot of it. Chase, what do you got?
This is honest behavior, and it's behavior of people that are in pain. And we'll see more of this in a minute. Thomas, the dad here, is almost at the point of tears, I think, or he's very emotional about this. You can see his mouth and chin quiver as he's essentially mentally processing that he won't see her again, because the insinuation she's not coming until he's essentially dead is what's being said here. And when Tom raises his right hand with this number 4 here, he looks at his fingers, and I think this is to check that it's the right number being held up. This is very common. I've taken final exams on this kind of stuff. This is called dysarthria. This is different little things that happen with uncoordination or lack of coordination. And with any stroke, you're going to have some kind of impaired body language there. There's sometimes difficulty with gestures, eye contact, often due to some kind of physical or cognitive limits. And his stroke likely took place maybe in that area. And when somebody has a stroke that affects the somatosensory areas and motor cortex, this is most likely to be seen, this kind of behavior here. And just as a side note, if there's damage to other parts of the brain, like the basal ganglia, or thalamus, or cerebellum, this can have a really big impact on speech and nonverbal communication. Thing that Hugh Hefner had, Greg, that you were talking about, it's called Wernicke's aphasia, that damaged the part of the brain called the Wernicke's area. But anyway, the brother here is also using a gesture outside of his frame. And Greg always talks about the fish being this big versus the fish being this big and how people gesturing outside the frame. But this is also common when somebody's discussing something that's not necessarily true. They want to kind of put it to the side. But you'll also see it when people talk about social groups that they aren't involved in or they feel that they don't belong to. There's a famous video about a woman who was kicked out of a cult in the 1970s, I think. And she does this exact behavior. I think it was one of the Charles Manson girls. I'll have to find it and maybe put it up on one of our shorts. But for this clip, you see more sadness in the father and brother and more anger in the sister. So from a behavioral standpoint, I view all humans' emotions as stemming from 2 key emotions. It's either love or fear. Anger, for example, comes from fear. And I think that there's a feeling of fear of abandonment or betrayal there in the sister. And for the next 10 or so videos, each video, I'm going to give you a little pro tip. And each one, after each of the following videos, I'm going to give you a reason why a hypothetical, totally hypothetical, of course, malignant narcissist would do something like abandon their family. So reason number one is self-image protection. These malignant narcissists may want to maintain an idealized self-image, and they might perceive their family as a threat to this image. So if their family background doesn't fit this newly acquired wealth and status, cutting ties, denying their existence is a protection mechanism for identity. Scott, what do you got?
All right. You're right, Greg. The father, he adapts a little bit with that cane. I don't think he's got a lot to adapt with. I mean, as far as his neurological deficits go. So and you're right, I think he's apprehensive about what the question's going to be because he's sort of on the spot right now. He's done a bunch of things that are questionable, and he's on the impression, and he is correct, that they're going to bring those up and talk about him as they go through this. Now, the son, this is just my opinion, I think we're seeing the body language of someone who's a bit insecure with themselves, and they're not the type of person to be boisterous and go out and talk a lot. And I'm not saying he's shy. I'm saying he's just lacks confidence, because when he finishes his sentences and he starts the next ones, we see all these jerky little movements to make sure everything's okay. And I think he's not able to express himself with the vigor and verve that he would like to do, that he would like to. So I think that's why we're seeing all those jerky little movements and stuff with him, because he's trying to be confident, but he's just not. He doesn't know how to express himself confidently. And the sister, the stepsister, you're right, Greg, she has a very expressive face. A lot going on there. A lot more than you would usually have in a situation like this, I think. And again, that could be because maybe she's not able to express herself with her hands and use illustrators the way that most people are. So a lot of times she uses her head and her face. But you're right about that eyebrow going up, and it's a right one, which I can hardly do. I can hardly get mine up there. But I don't know if that's maybe some kind of genetic thing or maybe not genetic, but maybe somewhere she's seen it 1,000 times, and she started doing that when she was a kid because she saw her dad do it all the time when she was a little kid. I think she's expressing a lot of controlled movements, though, in her face. But those, again, are combined. They're sort of mixed with these uncontrolled movements in her eyebrows, because we see a whole lot of eyebrow play in there. When they're up and they start down, that may have something to do with the multiple sclerosis, because of those muscles aren't working as well as they should, so they get a little bit jerky when they're going up and down. That could be it, but it's really interesting. So taking that into consideration, we're probably seeing pretty much what she's conveying when she's talking. I think that's what she's feeling emotionally as well, because we see a whole lot, and we'll go over this in a few minutes, of micro expressions in there. Be that because she has these again, the neurological deficits that may not make her expressions stay as long, or when she's switching from one to the other, we see other things happening. Who knows? That's a tough call. So this is going to be a really interesting group of videos as we go through here, trying to make decisions about what we think the emotions are they're experiencing as they go through it. All right, we good?
Yeah, Chase, one quick note, because good point. When people are out of frame, but they're illustrating something that should be out of frame, that makes sense. Hey, on the other hand, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's an important point. Yep.
One of those tape replays.
So we assume that because of the international press coverage, Meghan knows you've had a stroke.
Of course she has to know.
I'm taking it from that she hasn't called you.
No.
No phone call?
No.
How long has it been now?
It's been 4 years.
So just radio silence?
Exactly. If she doesn't turn up for a stroke, if that doesn't move her, what would?
There's a lot that's been lost already. And I grieve a lot. I mean, I've lost my father.
Dad didn't do anything. And she just woke up one day in a new world and decided that she doesn't have any family.
I believe she had a clear motive for writing family off because it would seemingly justify and perhaps delay the revelation of all of the lies that she had told the royal family.
I grew up as an only child, which everyone who grew up around me knows. And I wished I had siblings.
So before she met Harry, you had no doubt she was your sister?
I called her my sister. My little sister, though, I said, if there was any descriptive qualifier. She was my little sis.
I would have loved to have had siblings. That's why I'm so excited to be pregnant, so that Archie has someone.
Because she was quite clear. In her mind, she didn't have a sister, didn't have a brother.
But she did.
I remember when she was born, big new addition to the family, and we just have a very young sister here.
Thomas Jr. was 14 when Meghan came into the world. During the Oprah interview, when Meghan said she had no siblings, when she told the world she was an only child, I mean, were you disappointed?
No, I just made a little mark on my board and said, oh, there's another lie, click.
Were you puzzled?
Not any more puzzled than I was when she said, I lost my father. We knew that she didn't lose our dad. She iced our father. And there's a very big difference. It was deliberate.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, let me first frame this just a little bit. Now we're talking about age difference. So let's give Meghan the benefit of a doubt and say what she means versus what the words say. I didn't have a sister doesn't necessarily mean I didn't have a biological genetic connection. Might mean there's nobody in my house. I will tell you, my youngest brother is 11 years younger than I am. And he would tell you the first thing he remembers about me is music from under my door, and then I'd moved away, because that's a big difference. By the time he really was cognizant, I joined the Army and gone away. And so there's a dramatic difference. And he's 7 years younger than my other brother. So you're in a different space. I've read before that 7 years is enough to make a youngest child feel like an only child. I'll leave it at that. Give her a benefit of a doubt there. The other piece to realize is this woman was then 16. At the time they split, at the time the parents split, this woman, Samantha, would have been 22 years old, for example. So there's a big difference there. So take that into account as you're thinking about it. Watch Meghan as she starts with a disclaimer when she says, which everyone who grew up around me knows. She does a vocal fry, which she has naturally, but this is pronounced. Her chin goes down, maybe it's apprehension, and she adapts on that left ring finger. So there's some interesting things going on with her. Then Samantha, of course, now we see that biological or emulation behavior as that one brow rises when she's showing skepticism. We saw that the same thing in the dad when we began. Here's an interesting note. Each of you try to raise your one brow and then pay attention to your contempt face. It's almost always on the opposite side. I've never seen it both on the same side, as interesting as that is. And I think the reason is because we can show skepticism and contempt at the same time, and it probably wouldn't work that way. And so I think our body just gets accustomed to whatever it does. Pay attention to people around you as you're seeing this. It's an important one. She's a little smug as she responds to this question, meaning Samantha, as she responds to the question about her sister. And she does a little bit of that looking down her nose smug thing with the engaged upper face and the straight lower face. And then she goes and says, I called her my sister with amusement in her eyes. The brother, who says he was 14 at the time, at the mention of Oprah, awaits kind of apprehensively. If you notice, his mouth is in intake. He's pulling back the sides of his mouth and his tongue juts. I think that's apprehension as to what Oprah said or what was said on Oprah, whether he watched it or didn't, don't know. But the minute he realizes what the question is going to be, watch that brow rise in understanding of what they're talking about, in recognition. This is a useful thing for you at work. When you're sitting talking to somebody and they're withdrawing their mouth in apprehension about something, but then their brow rises, you've gotten through to them. It's important for you to know. But he uses very specific words. This makes me start to think there's some baggage in this family, and we're not talking about baggage today. This is not about today. This is about some time ago, and it just happens to be playing out today. Big new addition to family. His whole body narrates. He shifts and eye blocks when he says it. His body shifts and he eye blocks. He slows his cadence and elongates pronunciation as he says, big, new, very young sister here. When I hear something that pronounced, I always think of Aaron Caffey, Kill My Parents. That pronounced difference makes me want to know what's going on. There's lots of ways that old stuff can come up, and I think that's what we're starting to see. There's some underlying cause here. Scott, what do you got?
All right. I think she opens up with that I landed on the moon energy, or she seems a little bit too confident. And her confidence for me is so extreme, I'm not comfortable with believing what she says and the emotions she's supposed to be experiencing at this point. So that kind of bothers me. Anytime I see that and I'm talking to somebody, well, if I'm talking to somebody that's done something they shouldn't have and they start that, then it's a big red flag. But in a situation like this, it's still a red flag because it doesn't feel right. I know she's got a couple of problems with it, a couple of problems. The big one, MS is huge. but she's got a situation there where she can't express herself as freely as I'm sure she'd want to. But man, she's opening that one up with the confidence of, out the wazoo. I'll just say that. And then we see more of the those exaggerated facial expressions. And we're seeing everything from the wide eyes to the illustrating with her head, that chin back, everything you were talking about, Greg. And then she cuts into that vocal fry when she's talking about her little sister. Personally, I've seen this in TV shows or movies where the person is trying to, it all of a sudden cuts to them. It's the beginning of the movie or the TV show, and they're riding in a car doing something, or two people together, and one has to say the other, so you'll know what's happening. We've done this since we were little sis, or since we were young, little sis. So they have to call them little sis. I've never heard anybody call anybody little sis. Have you guys heard that before?
That was my nickname for you, Scott.
That's right. That's right. I saw 2 of your shows at down at the Chuckle Hut, and I thought you were fantastic. I've got tickets to the next one, and hopefully I'm going to I'll get the VIP thing where I can meet you and shake hands in person.
There's your 5 minutes.
Yeah. So, but I've never heard anybody call their sister little sis. It's like the L-I-apostrophe-L, lil sis. Man. So that sounds, it's just starting to smell to me. I thought I really didn't like Meghan very much. And I'm beginning to think I don't like this woman very much either. So I'm wondering if I'm not going to like them both equally. I'll not like them both equally, however you'd say that grammatically correct. Then she fades out of that vocal fry, and she starts talking about, what does she talk about where it cuts, Mark? And you can see the cut in there. Mm-hmm. I don't have that written down on here. But with that, we see that open mouth, which she's taking in information, and almost like she's not startled, but she's like, what? That kind of thing. And then we hear the vocal fry again. But when she says, but she did, like that. But when we're seeing confirmation nods, I'm not so sure their relationship was as tight as she's coming on as it was when they were younger. That's the feeling I'm getting at this point. There'll be women watching this that will get the same feeling from that, I think, because they can watch things and get a different, their brain takes in information differently than guys does. It takes in a whole lot more, and it can decipher what's happening much more quickly than we can. And that's why they get women's intuition. You just get a gut feeling. So I think there are going to be a lot of people out there that feel that way as well. And the micro expressions we're seeing are triggered by, I think, suppressed feelings as well, of anger and probably resentment and frustration, because we're seeing a lot of that going on, a lot of changes, a lot of things happening in there. And like I said before, whether it's because of her neurological deficits or it's because she's actually experiencing all those emotions, I don't know. I can't tell. I really can't tell. But I think there's a whole lot happening here emotionally. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. So look, be careful in this one, because this is a beautifully crafted, put together argument. I love this show, by the way, and I love that interviewer. I can't remember his name, but I think he's Ian. He's done some great shows, and he's a great interviewer. And this show is beautifully put together. But to beautifully put something together, you have to miss out a lot. You have to put a lot on the floor. A lot of it has to go missing. And so, look, here's what we get here. This is a complex situation, but what we get from the female here, the sister, is that iconic eyebrow raise. It is so clear. It is so enormous that it becomes not just a physical gesture. It's that icon of question, doubt, uncertainty. That a big frame of question, doubt, uncertainty. And then we cut immediately to Meghan Markle, who is doing another big iconic gesture of throat back, hands forward, so face to the heavens, exposure here, which either is the extreme release of stress, big stress building up and releasing that, or extreme arrogance. Well, which one is it? Well, it fits better with this story if it's extreme arrogance. It's a nicer piece of drama if it's a piece of arrogance. So we're more likely to veer to, well, that's a bit arrogant going on there, because we had the questioning iconic eyebrow raise beforehand. So beautiful juxtaposition put there by the video makers, the TV channel. Is the TV channel here trying to solve a disagreement or promote a disagreement and maybe, keep it going a little bit. Like, well, they've got to sell advertising space. So my money would be on, they're not trying to solve anything here. They're trying to prolong it. So we've got to understand that as well. I'm not saying that there's no disagreement there, but I am saying that this documentary will try and create and prolong it more than anything else. Greg, to your point of how complex these situations are. So I was 13, 14 when I got my little brother. And so for me, from my point of view as a 14-year-old, I had, that was like having a child. That was huge responsibility, huge bond. However, I then went to university at 18. There's every good reason that he would feel abandoned when I'd left. Every good reason for that feeling of abandonment, because a key adult has just disappeared, gone, living somewhere else now. So it's complex, isn't it? Because what you feel isn't necessarily what they're feeling, and your actions, though they feel right to you at the time, you don't necessarily know at the time what it does to another human being at a key point in their life, 5, 6 in their life. So, and again, that isn't brought up. Only one aspect, one angle is brought up here. Let's see how it progresses. Chase, what do you got on this one?
We've analyzed some bad people that I think I would still rather hang out with than Meghan. That's all I got. I'm kidding. So you can tell
she's not going to hang out with us.
Yeah. No, she's not coming in, dude.
You can tell a lot about somebody's internal drivers by how they get upset and what they get upset with. Some might detach emotionally from an issue, like you're seeing with Meghan's brother here, and some might feel anger and contempt, like you're seeing with the sister. So detaching emotionally from an issue might imply that somebody's hurt by it, and they develop the detachment in order to soften the emotional pain. Seeing contempt and anger toward the same behavior probably means somebody was hurt, past tense, and then transitioned into anger because of a betrayal, social injury, which means that they were made to feel socially embarrassed or isolated or outcast. And I'm waiting to see on this one, I was waiting to see Mark's comment on iced and the metaphor of coldness, this idea of cold and the winter. I was hoping for that.
I'll let you tell you took it very well.
All right. The Ice Queen. So, pro tip number 2, malignant narcissists are often exhibiting a pretty strong sense of entitlement, and they believe they kind of deserve special treatment or admiration. In this context, they may view their newfound wealth and fame as a validation of superiority and might discard their family because they believe they've outgrown them, or that their family is no longer worthy of their attention at all.
One of those tape replays.
I grew up as an only child, which everyone who grew up around me knows. And I wished I had siblings.
So before she met Harry, you had no doubt she was your sister.
I called her my sister. My little sister, though, I said, if there was any descriptive qualifier. She was my little sis.
I would have loved to have had siblings. That's why I'm so excited to be pregnant, so that Archie has someone.
Because she was quite clear. In her mind, she didn't have a sister, didn't have a brother.
But she did.
I remember when she was born, big new addition to the family, and we just have a very young sister here.
Thomas Jr. was 14 when Meghan came into the world. During the Oprah interview, when Meghan said she had no siblings, when she told the world she was an only child, were you disappointed?
No, I just made a little mark on my board and said, oh, there's another lie, click.
Were you puzzled?
Not any more puzzled than I was when she said, I lost my father. We knew that she didn't lose our dad, she iced our father. And there's a very big difference. It was deliberate.
But why do that, Samantha? Why do that to somebody, especially your family?
I'll tell you why. what she told the royal family, what she told Harry, wouldn't have jived, wouldn't have been consistent with the truth.
But why make up those stories? Are you suggesting that she doesn't think that her family is good enough?
Exactly, and I think more than that, it doesn't seem like she felt that she was good enough, that seemingly in her mind, she had to inflate who she was to garner false admiration and to be accepted by the royals, instead of saying, look, I've worked very hard. My family was upper middle class. He put me through the best schools. He did the best he could. He loved me. He sacrificed, and for that, I'm grateful. Instead, what she did was engage in self-glorification and leave everybody else out of the equation as if she existed in a vacuum. In my opinion, she would still be a waitress if it wasn't for Dad.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
Here's my profile of Samantha, the sister here. I don't think she's at all seeking the fame and fortune. I don't think she's after wealth or any of this money. I think she sees life through a social lens, and watching her sister do all of this was incomprehensible. So she sees life through this lens of family, social, and she sees what it's doing to their father, mostly, I think, because she seems to be pretty close. On that note, I'll let you guys kind of take the behavior side of this and quickly explain how being socially outcast by your own daughter and thrust into negative limelight could lead to a stroke, hypothetically. Number one is increased blood pressure. Stress like this can trigger release of stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, which increases blood pressure. Hypotension, also a huge risk factor for stroke. Damage to the blood vessels in the brain, ruptures, blockages. Number two, inflammation. And this is just chronic stress leading to a state of chronic inflammation of the body. Inflammation causes damage to blood vessels, increased blood clots, which can just block blood flow to the brain. Three, changes in blood composition. Chronic stress increases the levels of these little protein things and chemicals that contribute to the formation of blood clots. I'll give you a few if you want to look them up. C-reactive protein is produced by the liver in response to the inflammation. There's fibrinogen. This is involved in blood clotting, again, elevated in people with stress. PAI1. This protein inhibits the breakdown of blood clots. And this other one, finally, called interleukin 6. It's a cytokine that's produced in response to inflammation. All of these are in response. Finally is tumor necrosis factor alpha. And this is another thing that responds to inflammation. All of these from stress, just from having a tremendous amount of stress in your life, being outcast, having the media follow you around, can lead to a stroke. So, and stress can lead to unhealthy lifestyle choices and all that. But finally, here's the pro tip. Number 3, reinvention. A malignant narcissist may desire to gain some wealth, some fame, might be seen as an opportunity for a malignant narcissist to reinvent themselves and abandon their past for a new identity that aligns with their new status. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so nice profile. The sister here is also a profiler, and so I'm going to give her profile of her sister or stepsister. So this is Samantha's profile of her sister, Meghan. So it starts feeling like it might be something about a personality profile, but it really does become a personality disorder profile that she moves into. So she felt she was not good enough. Well, that's repressed insecurity. She inflates, she says. So that's inflated self, looking for admiration, the need for attention and high status attention. Acceptance by the royals, again that need for attention and around high status icons. There's the idea of work ethic and sacrifice versus self-glorification as well. We've got a character here that could have said, I got here by work ethic and sacrifice, but instead she moves towards self-glorification. So yeah, for me, it's not simply a personality profile. She is definitely drawing a picture here of a very distinct personality disorder. I'll let you decide what you think it might be. I mean, Chase has already, mentioned it really. Now the interesting thing is she's going to ramp up that idea later on. She's going to give another profile, which is way beyond what you just saw there. So what I want to think about is why didn't she give that later personality profile or personality disorder profile earlier on? How come it's ramping up, and therefore how accurate might it be? I mean, look, it's very similar to what Chase is talking about there. So I'm not saying her personality, her profiling here is inaccurate. It's actually probably quite good. What I'm going to suggest is that she takes a good run at it after this and ramps it up a little bit further. And she's going to do a profile as well of the husband, as well, of Meghan's husband, Harry, I think his name is. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, Mark, I actually have in my notes, maybe she's a panelist. We don't know.
Yeah,
She's got some great language.
Yeah,
hey, if you're out there and you're listening, you probably won't like me when we're done with this, but we always welcome interviews. So I will say this. I said it in the beginning. If a fish swims in oil, a fish will taste like oil. Behaviors come from somewhere. So if a person's behaving that way, narcissism, we all know, comes from feeling inferior. How a person becomes inferior, we don't know. If we knew the magic formula that makes a narcissist, we could interrupt that. We don't know where those things come from. This woman is waiting for this opportunity to tell you about her profile of Meghan. It is very clear. See that amusement and softening of the face at the top? She's waiting to deliver this. You see that look in her face of, I'm glad you asked. This is, Chase, you talked about narcissist having this feeling of entitlement. This woman has a feeling of entitlement that has been betrayed, is my opinion, based on what I see. Because when people get their feelings hurt, it's usually because they are disappointed. When they feel angry, it's because a feeling of an entitlement being betrayed. That's why they get angry and they hold on to it. Like, if you hurt my feelings, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to hang out with that guy anymore. And I'll just tell me what you're going to do so you can tell me how you hurt my feelings, and we'll go from there. But this woman goes with a gleeful face as she starts talking about it, not jiving and not being consistent. The happiest face we've seen yet. People who like drama will show you they like drama because all that stuff will light their face. Again, I believe drama is stranded intellectual capacity, and how it expresses itself is based on social mores of the person or social norms the person lives in. If you have a great friend, Scott, in Jeff Foxworthy, who talks about people who express things in a different fashion because they are unsophisticated. And all we mean by that is they don't have the same set of rules we do. So there you go. Then there's anger at instead what she did. You see her narrowing of her eyes. You see her chin jut, sides of her mouth draw back, and her lower teeth show. That's anger. You don't show anger when you're hurt. You show anger when you're angry. Hurt is a different emotion entirely. It can lead to anger, and you're right about that, Chase. She could have boiled over and over and over. Then when she gets to this whole thing where she says she's engaged in self-glorification and leave everybody else out, the most emphatic language we get out of her the entire time. And then she goes to a hard eye lock when she says, in my opinion, if it wasn't for Dad, if we did everything else, we took everything else out and we said engaged in self-glorification, leave everybody else out with that emphatic body language, and then the hard eye lock, and in my opinion, I think we're seeing somebody who feels betrayed. Scott, what do you got?
Wow. Yeah, I think you nailed that, man. So this is where her anger really starts to ramp up. Because again, she's got that I landed on the moon energy. She comes out, and you're right, Greg. She wants to get to this so fast she can't hardly stand it. She's waiting for this one, and she delivers so well on it. And we see her anger being so pronounced you can't miss it in here, and not only in micro expressions, but on these full-on expressions of anger. They happen really quickly. They're not quite as fast as micro expressions. Some of them, the full ones. But they don't last that long. Things are moving. Not like when we saw Amber Heard and she would fake and go from one expression to another expression to another expression without that morph between them. These are morphing, but they're a little shaky and squiggly, I think, again, because of the problems she's got going on. And now the first question, that's when that happens. Now the second question, she sort of gets her warmed up. So and she's ready for it. That's when we see it. That's when we see her. She takes in information with that head down, and she's taking everything in. But then when she gives information out, the head goes back, and she's being what I would think would be narcissistic. That's a hard call. You can't really tell because I never talked to her, but that's what it sure seems like to me. Then again, when she's delivering, that head goes down, but the chin comes forward. So she's got a lot going on in there. Her cadence starts speeding up. She starts getting a little bit louder. So this is all the little tiny signs of anger that show you somebody's really coming in hot. Along with that, those the expressions we're seeing, not only the full expressions, the micro expressions, and we're seeing them change, from one to the other in the squiggly little fashion. I think a lot of them are conscious, but a lot of them, most of them are unconscious. I don't think she understands or knows or is aware that she's making these expressions like that. We see everything from anger to happiness to frustration. I think we're seeing a little regret in there as well. And I think like her brother at this point, even though I think she's well read. I think she's very well read. And I think she reads a lot of those books by John Grisham, that kind of thing. Because if you listen to her sentence structure and the words she's using to describe what's happening, completely different than the way her brother talks and her dad talks. So I've talked about this little parlor trick I do, and it's just a parlor trick where you can talk to somebody for a few minutes and you can figure out what kind of books they're reading, what genre they're into. And I've got $1,000 that says she's into John Grisham because her sentence structure and the words she's using are the same words you hear these characters use in those books. One of the things I hate about Dostoevsky is that there's so many dang commas in his writing. It could be from the translations, I don't know. But in hers, there are none. And that's the more American style than it would be like a Russian style or the old classics. So she's not reading old classic things. She's reading a lot of modern stuff. And I'll bet you $1,000 that's what she reads. And if you watch this, if you're watching this, what's her name?
Samantha.
Samantha, if you're watching this, email me and let me know. I know you hate me now, but email and let me know because I want to know what you're reading. I want to know if I've gotten this right or not because I usually I can nail it. But I think she's a voracious reader. I think she reads that stuff all the time. Legal thrillers, that's what those are called. So that's the genre I think she's into. So, all right, is that all of us?
I think she's been reading this thing too.
I think her friends have been reading that thing, figure out what the hell's going on.
Maybe she's reading our friend. What was her name? The one who killed her husband.
Get the list out.
The author who killed her husband.
Yeah, have you seen that show, Greg? That's just about everybody.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Remember, I get inundated. It's like I've been hitting the head.
Oh, I know you're talking about How to Kill Your Husband. That one.
Yeah, I can't remember her name.
Book.
Nolan her husband or something like that, right?
I don't know. I can't remember.
It doesn't matter.
Was she found guilty?
I
Yes,
think so.
Yes,
I think so. So, Greg, why don't you tell him what Jeff said when I told you to tell him hello?
Oh yeah. So Foxworthy's on a plane. Did I tell you guys this story?
No.
So Foxworthy's on a plane, and we're walking past, and my wife goes, "That's Jeff Foxworthy." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So I go back and I called Scott and I said, "Hey, your buddy Foxworthy's on a plane." He said, "Go talk to him." I was like, "It doesn't really work because it's a small plane." He said, "Then go give him a note for me." And I said, "Okay." So I walk up, and I didn't say Mr. Foxworthy. I said, "Sir," and he was like, looked at me like, "Yeah, oh yeah, what?" And I said, "Do you know Scott Rouse?" He said, "In fact, I do." And I handed him a note, and he opened it, and he just said, "You can tell him your boys made me laugh." He laughed out loud, real loud.
Tell him what you put on the note.
The note said, "Jeff, you left your." I'll mail them to you.
Oh Lord, I'll take that out. It'll kill me.
One of those tape replays.
But why do that, Samantha? Why do that to somebody, especially your family?
I'll tell you why. What she told the royal family, what she told Harry, wouldn't have jived, wouldn't have been consistent with the truth.
But why make up those stories? Are you suggesting that she doesn't think that her family is good enough?
Exactly. And I think more than that, it doesn't seem like she felt that she was good enough. That seemingly in her mind, she had to inflate who she was to garner false admiration and to be accepted by the royals instead of saying, look, I've worked very hard. My family was upper middle class. He put me through the best schools. He did the best he could. He loved me. He sacrificed. And for that, I'm grateful. Instead, What she did was engage in self-glorification and leave everybody else out of the equation as if she existed in a vacuum. In my opinion, she would still be a waitress if it wasn't for Dad.
In the book, Harry describes Meghan as mourning the loss of her father.
Yeah.
I knew my way around grief, and there was no mistaking it. This was pure grief. She was mourning the loss of her father.
Sounds as though you're dead.
Yeah, exactly. She killed me and then mourned me.
Every day there was another humiliating photo in the papers. Thomas Markle buying a new loo. Thomas Markle buying a six-pack. Thomas Markle with his belly hanging over his belt.
My father, he worked 40 years in television, won 2 Emmy Awards, was nominated for another one. And so all of his peers at ABC and in television seeing deadbeat Dad. He's a drunk, he's slovenly, he's, cashing in on his daughter.
You think he's been very unfairly treated, don't you?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, at no time did she come out and say, don't treat my family like that. That's not true. So she had the opportunity, if we were misunderstanding something, to set it straight and to take charge in a positive way.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so first of all, I think Harry's voiceover is fantastic, especially when he says the word pure grief, because it reminds me of like an aftershave or perfume advert. The smell of pure grief.
By Harry.
What are you wearing? Pure grief. It's just so beautiful, so beautiful. He did a wonderful job on that.
I think that's a clip from his audiobook.
Yeah, it's him reading it. I mean, there's a fantastic job. Nice voiceover.
Mark, if he starts his own cologne line and it's called Pure Grief, you need to ask for royalties.
I feel he'll need to ask for royalties as well back. So look, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And so the main thing I see here is pure anger in the stepsister here. And people have alluded to it and mentioned it before, but I'm going to go through every indicator that I see because it really comes together for me in this one here. We have the eyes wide, at times, Chase, showing certainly sometimes 3 of the areas of the sclera there. So really furious eyes to then often getting targeted. So it goes from target to fury. Amazing. Forehead is down. It's often thought that the forehead goes down in order that if fighting starts, that blows will skim off the top of the head and won't go near the eyes. So it's a protective gesture. Also, it means you get the protection here as well. The brow is knitted as well. So there's concern in there as well. The teeth are displayed, both the top and the lower teeth are displayed. We have top lip tightening as well, and nostril flare. Now, a few episodes back, I was saying, we don't really know why the top lip tightens. And then somebody sent me a message or put a comment and said, if you flare your nostrils, you can't help but tighten your top lip. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So maybe the top lip tightening in anger is simply because the nostrils flare. Because I've been trying to work out reasons why you would tighten your top lip around anger. What is the benefit of that? And yeah, I'm like, so thank you for that, panelist who put in. I think it's because it happens automatically. Anyway, hellish fury from the sister here. Scott, what do you got on this one?
All right. This is where everything changed for me when I still had hope that there may be, that I might like them as much as a little more than I didn't like Meghan. Because when Ian says she's mourning the loss of her father, we see a single, on the dad, just before it cuts away, there's this single shoulder shrug and his chin goes toward that shoulder. I noticed this a long time ago. I got this from Joe Navarro, though. He's the one that when I said, "Oh, I've seen that. I know what that is," and didn't put it together until I read it. When he talked about this, a single shoulder shrug, and then that chin toward that. We see with his deficit neurologically, even I think that's what we're seeing there. I don't think he's telling the truth about that, because what they're doing is they're creating this narrative. When he's trying to say, "Yeah, she said you were dead," he's like, "Yeah, she said I was dead." That's not what's happening. These people are doing the very same thing that the royals are doing, except the royals aren't doing anything about it. They're ignoring it. So they're cool about it. And these people, when they get bad news or something's happened with that same couple, they're doing it the wrong way. They're going off. They're on their handing out the emails they're getting or the letters he gets from his daughter, those kind of things. And we're seeing this fight go on, not from over here. That's all inside, and they're quiet about it. So that's part of that looking very stoic and being royal. And then you see these folks over here where they're just going red, man. They're all mad and going off and saying all these things. So if you look at it from that perspective, from here on out, you'll see what I'm talking about. Because at this point, I'm kind of turning on the family over there, not Meghan and Harry. I'm starting to the weight's starting to go. Spidey called me and we talked about this as well because he's seeing the same kind of thing. So it's kind of going in favor of Meghan at this point. That's how much that's where this is headed, in my opinion, for me anyway. That's where that's headed. Well, the next question, the dad reinforces that narrative. He goes on again and talks about how it's talking about death and how she's mourning him and those types of things. And she's not. What she's quote unquote mourning is this breakup they've had in their family. And so she's not seeing him anymore, and she's probably cut him off. That's what happens. It's what children of narcissists do. They cut their parents off, or they'll cut that person off. If you're married to one, you cut them off. And I forget the name they use, that they use, or the term they use for it, but they cut them off and they don't see him or talk to him anymore. All communication is cut off. And I think that's what's happened. And they don't understand that. That's why they're over there all worked up and flailing around and getting all mouthy about everything. And then when it goes back to the sister, we see the same thing we've seen up to this point. We see all those not over-exaggerated, but they're really big expressions. And we're seeing a lot of those little micro-expressions as well, still flying around in there, going back to everything that she does. Greg, what do you got?
Well, let's just start by saying you can't have a train wreck unless the train hits something. So you can have both of these parties be that kind of folks. And like I said in the beginning, I think these folks are somewhere on the spectrum. And I don't mean of autism, I mean of redneckery. So as we work through this, we'll see how close and how far they move in. At mourning the loss of her father, the sister purses her lips and shifts her posture quickly in disapproval. Now, you just said it. There's a key thing. When you get divorced, when you break up a relationship of some kind, there's a mourning period and a true grief period that follows. And, I remember when I got divorced and asked a psychologist I work with every day, how long does it take? He said 4 years for that to go away altogether. Well, it's human nature to grief. So maybe he did see grief. Maybe he does know what grief looks like. But I also think he's projecting and he's looking for something. But while we're talking about projection, let's also talk about the sister. Samantha's, now she knows exactly how Harry's brain works. And then she's going after that. I'm not going to go a whole lot in here. There's a single brow judgment in the father again. That single brow keeps rising. The daughter now looks for reasons why she's justified in her belief and in this, in my opinion, drama that she's created. Look, if I didn't like you and I haven't seen you in many years and you don't care, you're gone. Look, I know plenty of relatives that I haven't seen in 20 years, not because I hate them, just because they don't fit in my life, not because I jettison them, because I just don't live where they are. And that's the way it goes. I don't ever think, hey, they did this to me or they did that to me, because I don't have a feeling of entitlement that something went wrong and I need to be away from them. However, here she's using a borrowed, I'm going to use it as surrogate resume statement for her father. Well, he did this and he's great and he's wonderful. And she did that to him. You see all of her arrows are aligned. All of her body language is aligned when she is demeaning and aggressive about Meghan because she feels justified. And I think she's borrowing that resume statement to create more justification for herself. Now, do I think she's an evil person? No, don't. I think there's some drama in her head about this. And we'll get more into detail about why I think that's happening a little further in. But that's what I see now. Mark, what do you got?
I went on this one.
Oh, sorry. Chase, what do you got?
Scott, I don't know how you'd say the other side's quiet after they make a documentary and a book and Oprah interviews and
not
79
not Meghan and Harry. I'm talking about the family, their family. I mean, the royal family, not Meghan and Harry. No, that wouldn't be. No, I'm with you, man.
They're just going to have a coronation this week. That's all. So,
yeah, they're not they're not part of the train wreck. They're observers.
Exactly. You nailed it.
So I think they're just, with what Meghan did and what she said on camera about her family, I would be probably more upset. I don't think I would have it as together as these people if this was my own family doing this. So I understand the anger. I don't think they did anything first. And with Meghan being in this relationship, it makes me wonder. I don't think Harry was very much like this throughout his life, and I wonder if maybe some of this stuff is contagious to Harry in their relationship. And obviously, I think the behavior here is honest. It's angry. It's spiteful. It's reacting to hurt, but I think it's honest, most of it. And they're saying there's this mourning of father and all that kind of stuff. I think what's going on there, Meghan literally said she doesn't have siblings. She lost her father, which any rational human being, if we use the rational person standard, would think that means that somebody died. So some physically, some emotionally, and some socially, but they're all hurt. As you can see Thomas's face here in what I think is the dad in actual emotional pain. And I don't see a lot of anger here that I can see. And it's more sadness than anything. And I believe right now he would still take her back without hesitation, just based on his behavior here in this clip. And I'm just talking about the dad. And there's two things I want to rivet your attention on when this clip comes back up. You're going to see Thomas's head shaking while he's talking about M. The first time I watched this, I thought it was something called an intention tremor. And this is a tremor where something that happens after a stroke does some damage to the cerebellum. Intention tremors occur during these purposeful, intended movements, like reaching for a glass or speaking, and they're often more pronounced the closer they get to the target or the glass that they're picking up. I thought that was it. And underneath this intention tremor, you can hear his respiration shift. You can actually hear a respiratory sadness or like kind of holding something back there. And lastly, there's a pro tip number 4. Pathological self-absorption and lack of empathy might make it difficult for a malignant narcissist to form deep connections with other people, including family members. Abandoning that family or denying their existence might be a way for a malignant narcissist to avoid confronting difficulties and maintaining a sense of control over her own life.
One of those tape replays.
In the book, Harry describes Meghan as mourning the loss of her father.
Yeah.
I knew my way around grief, and there was no mistaking it. This was pure grief. She was mourning the loss of her father.
Sounds as though you're dead.
Yeah, exactly. She killed me and then mourns me.
Every day there was another humiliating photo in the papers. Thomas Markle buying a new loo. Thomas Markle buying a 6-pack. Thomas Markle with his belly hanging over his belt.
My father, he worked 40 years in television. Won 2 Emmy Awards, was nominated for another one. And so all of his peers at ABC and in television seeing deadbeat dad. He's a drunk, he's slovenly, he's, cashing in on his daughter.
You think he's been very unfairly treated, don't you?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, at no time did she come out and say, don't treat my family like that. That's not true. So she had the opportunity, if we were misunderstanding something, to set it straight and to take charge in a positive way.
Can I put a proposition to you? Because you're family, you guys are just so much alike. And Meghan really is just a carbon copy. What do you say to that proposition? I mean, in the sense that you're really just as bad as each other.
Well, I throw, you throw them back.
I mean, she has made money out of selling her story.
No offense.
You have made money sometimes out of selling your story.
That she can afford a much big to evolve.
He's got those 4,000-year-old vampire overlord eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're all jet black. Are we good?
Yeah.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
I like how when the interviewer suggests they're maybe a carbon copy, the dad and the brother both nod their heads. The sister, on the other hand, remains indignant. All of them emerge from this, though, in some self-soothing behavior. And a way to put that into a little capsule so you can see it easier in your own life is that any repetitive behavior is self-soothing. Again, we're bringing up Joe Navarro here. That's where I heard that from. And you can see it when the main topic is presented here by the interviewer. They all had a little stress response to this question, but the question itself is stressful on its own. So it could be expected to cause stress in anybody. So it's expected. I don't think it suggests deception at any level. And I'll wrap this up with pro tip number 5, control. Malignant narcissists often have this strong need for control, and they might view some relationships as a means to an end. Abandoning family, denying their existence could be an attempt to exert control over that person's personal narrative so they can shape their public image as they see fit. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, a couple things. I agree with you. I think the crux of the matter of this entire interview is this question. Aren't you just like her? Aren't you just like her? And in fact, yes, they all are. You know, I mean, to quote somebody we know, when Meghan was saying, they're throwing me under the bus for money, he said, what the hell do you think you're doing? Because it's exactly what both sides have been doing. They're getting in front of a camera in exchange for. The royals haven't, of course, because it's not what they do. And the whole stiff upper lip thing, Mark, and the very British thing they're doing. But this very American playing out, and Harry's becoming American very quickly. Too bad Jerry Springer just died. He could have maybe had him on. That would have been a great opportunity to see how this thing played out. But watch the father and the son's adapters. Here's one of those things. Human beings are wired, and if you think that we are born clean slates, I don't. I think we have a lot of genetic wiring that causes us to behave the same way as our parents. I move like my father, for example. And it's not just because my father was there. It's because I'm wired physically the same way. Watch the father and the son's adapters when they both get uncomfortable and they're adapting on that right leg. Both have their left hand on the inside of their thigh. Here, when the father's trying to think of what to say, you hear him stammering. That's not related to the stroke. I think it's just him stammering and saying, "Dee, dee, dee." And he's trying to get an analogy about her having a bigger ball than he does. I'll leave that for whatever it's worth. And then the daughter and the father both turtle when they're challenged. You see them both shrink down when he challenges them and said, "Aren't you both alike?" And then when they're called out on this family drama, here's the difference. If you're called out on family drama and you know you have the upper hand, you don't typically say, "They did it too." You typically just say, I didn't do it. They don't ever say that. You see her open her mouth in disbelief, the daughter. That open her mouth in disbelief would probably be a predecessor to some aggression. But when I think about people who, when you say you did this wrong and they point out that somebody else did it, it's kind of like me looking at Chase and saying, "Hey, you got something in your teeth." And you say, "So does she." Not related. If you don't have stuff in your teeth, you don't have stuff in your teeth. If you do, you don't point to the other person and say, "So do they." Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I love this. I love Ian. He's fantastic. He's just classic Australian because as you all well know, especially you Australians out there, you can be a little bit harsh now and again, even for the English. Like you take it just that little bit too far. I understand why. But he goes, "I've got a proposition for you," and then he just slaps him around the face with, "You're as bad as you're all cut from the same cloth, mate. You're all cut from the same cloth." So it is what we call tit for tat, which in my mind is the best film that Laurel and Hardy ever made. Tit for tat. I do one thing, you do a next thing, and it escalates and escalates and escalates and escalates. And basically that's what he's saying. It's you're just in a family tit for tat battle. Now, what's great is the family really do come together on this. And this will be a good juxtaposition as to what happens in the next video, because you see them align in many of their behaviors. They align somewhat in their acceptance of it. They align somewhat in wanting to interrupt. We see some regulator, some moderator gestures in there, some big, some smaller, but trying to interrupt with it. And what do they manage to interrupt with? Well, the unfairness of, look, I throw a ball, you throw a ball, I throw a ball. So it basically goes, it's tit for tat. That's what we do in this family. That's our way of operating. But it's unfair because she's gone and got a bigger ball. Well, okay, so now we are in this area of complaint of somebody has more status than I do, and that's unfair, and that cannot be tolerated. And they are all in agreement around this. So I love it when a family comes together around this. Scott, what do you got on this one?
Everybody wants to talk here. They all want to say something, but the only person talking is the dad. Because the other two, they have respect for him, or they've learned to keep their mouth shut and watch what they say and let him go first. So I don't know if that says that he's a narcissist and he was controlling them and all that stuff. But I thought that was really interesting. You see both of them. She's over there. Her mouth is going, but nothing's coming out. And the brother is trying to say something as well. So that to me is really interesting. Everybody's trying to keep quiet, but they're both looking for a spot to jump in where they don't run over the dad, you know? So we kind of do that here. No matter who's talking, they're the one we wait for our time and then try to jump in and say something. So, and then you have like you were saying, Greg, the adapters. You know, they're both adapting on their leg, and the son is adapting on his leg fairly hard. This is from a body language perspective. Almost, it's not uninteresting. It's just we're seeing the classics there that we always go over. So I'll leave it there. All right, we good?
Yeah.
Excellent. What?
Did you go?
Did you go? Oh no, I'm cutting you out. You're not going this time. We don't need you. We don't need your input, Jay. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, dude.
I think it's truthful. And I think they're probably deferring to the dad, because if you've seen any family where somebody has a neurological illness and they have trouble speaking, or they can't speak loudly enough, people tend to be more deferent to those people the moment they start talking. It's possible. There's a chance that he had several maybe baby strokes, which are called TIAs, leading up to this larger one, which could cause something called emotional lability. And this condition severely affects somebody's ability to control their mood. And I don't know if that's the case. I'm not saying it is. But we'll go ahead and wrap this one with pro tip number 6, a fear of vulnerability. The narcissist might have a fear of being seen as vulnerable or weak, and associating with family members that they view this way may undermine her carefully cultivated image of strength and being perfect and invincible. We've seen this in other people who followed a very similar recipe of pretending to be perfect, make everyone around them flawed, evil, and malicious.
One of those tape replays.
Can I put a proposition to you? Because you're family, you guys are just so much alike. And Meghan really is just a carbon copy. What do you say to that proposition? I mean, in the sense that you're really just as bad as each other.
Well, I throw no, you throw them back.
I mean, she has made money out of selling her story.
No offense.
You have made money sometimes out of selling your story.
But she can afford a much bigger ball.
Then there is the very personal 5-page letter Meghan wrote to him, parts of which he leaked to the British press.
The letter, I gave part of the letter to the Daily Mail.
The Mail on Sunday had printed the private letter Meg had written to her father.
So why would a dad do that? Well, the story is more complicated than we've been led to believe. This is the letter that the Queen approved.
The letter that Granny and Pa urged her to write.
Someone suggested she write you a letter, and the Queen said that's a good idea.
Yes, but the Queen never read this letter because it was a horrible letter, very insulting and cruel.
But Thomas, why did you give it to the Daily Mail, part of it?
Because at the same time, People magazine were coming out with it. The fact that Meghan had shared with 6 other people, right?
So you didn't think it was any big deal?
No, that's not the point. I thought I have to get my side into this too. I put out a little part of it. The other things in the letter are so hateful and so cruel that I wouldn't put it out. And that's more protecting her than myself.
All right. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the juxtaposition here. He is really quite animated about this situation, and now the kids around the outside have really stilled themselves down a little bit. I think there is a possibility, because we don't have the alignment of the movement anymore, is that they don't quite agree with something that he's saying here or something that he's done. If I could take a guess at this, it would be this, is that as a general rule, don't ever give anything to the Daily Mail, like anything. Don't give anything to the Daily Mail. Nothing. Even if you think it's a good idea, it'd be a really good idea to give the Daily Mail this. Probably don't do it, because it probably isn't going to work out well if you give something to the Daily Mail. Nothing against the Daily Mail, other than I don't think you should give stuff to the Daily Mail. It's never going to work out very well for you. He gave a private letter between him and his daughter to the Daily Mail. Now, I understand this, but, she said that she'd given it to some other people. So she's throwing a ball, and now he's got to throw a ball, and she's got a bigger ball, and now here's a really big ball. I'll give it to the Daily. No, don't give it to the Daily Mail. That won't work out well for you. They're not in it for you. The Daily Mail isn't in it for you. They have shareholders, and they're in it for their shareholders, their owners, and for political power. That's why they do what they do. Those two reasons, money and political power, which isn't in your favor. I have a feeling the two kids disagree with that move. I don't know for sure, but I would give it as a strong possibility. Greg, sounds like you've got an opinion on this one.
So a couple of things. Number one, he may have a big ball, she may have a big ball, but guess who's got really big balls? The Daily Mail. Oh, yeah. And if you want to know where most of our stories come from, I start with the Daily Mail, because if it's there, it's going to show up somewhere else. So if you got something to hide, don't share it here. That's right. I agree. I'm with you, Mark. So let's go from there. First, they start off with some, and the other thing to point out here is I agree with you. I think we're starting to see some disagreement, and we're going to see it show up even more pronounced in the next video. But I hear in the beginning, you'll see these guys doing some kind of weird movement, and you see their faces turning a certain way. That's B-reel. If you ever do TV, they're taking videos of it. It means nothing. Could have been you sitting in the snack room going, hey, where's the candy bar? It'll show up. Although he has had a stroke, and we can't really tell his tone of voice as well as we could in other places, there's a break in his voice here, a very uncharacteristic break that I think is real emotion. I think we're hearing him upset for the first real time, and we see that face compress and push toward the center when he's saying it was cruel. Look, this guy is feeling some emotion here. And I think the children, I think part of what we're seeing, Mark, is one of them may agree or disagree. He's being very careful as he works through this. When he says she shared it with 6 others, we always talk about a confirmation glance. There's a pronounced confirmation glance when he looks over at the daughter to see if she approves of what he just said. And then the brother's sitting fig leafing and adapting as he listens to whatever excuses these guys are coming up with. They could have just let the speculation die and not sent the letter to the Daily Mail. So look, regardless of what's going on, regardless of how you feel powerless, you continuing it, if she's got that kind of control, all she's going to do is bat it back in your court in a big way. At the point where he's walking through this thing, listen to him navigate and stumble over words. Yes, he's had a stroke, but we haven't seen that to now, which tells us, Mark, exactly what you're saying. There's something going on here that there's a reason for one or two of the children, to either agree with or disagree. We're going to see something different in the next one. Chase, what do you got?
Well, you guys took everything I was going to talk about. Let me give it to you a different way. Not a whole lot new in terms of deception or anything like that. So, do y'all know that that Pixar movie called Up?
Yeah.
Okay. When I watch the montage of them dating and getting married, and then she dies, and it brings me, no matter how many times I've watched it, it just brings me to like these heaving sobs towards the end of that thing. It's such a reminder of how important family is and how we should be getting dopamine from family instead of Instagram or a royal family. I think Meghan, watching this, would still cry watching it, but I think in her mind, it would only remind her of her new definition of family, and she would cry for herself. instead of the couple in the video. In essence, I'm saying that the video would just remind her of herself, and she would cry for herself. With that, I will just say that I'm a little bit biased here. It's one of my least favorite humans ever. Pro tip number 7. The narcissist believes that her family members are not as talented, ambitious, or intelligent as she is, and that associating with them could damage her reputation and, by proxy, her self-image, and by proxy, her self-worth. That's all I got. Was I last? Okay.
I think so.
No, but y'all took everything, so I've got nothing. Mark opened up with my,
really
with my
on it today,
opener.
aren't
Yeah, you opened up with my opener, and then everybody else with all my stuff just like checked it right off. So
we?
instead of
I
being
knew you were
boring.
going to do the Pixar thing.
Yes.
Well, I've
never seen one of those movies.
One of those tape replays.
Then there is the very personal 5-page letter Meghan wrote to him, parts of which he leaked to the British press.
The letter, I gave part of the letter to the Daily Mail.
The Mail on Sunday had printed the private letter Meg had written to her father.
So why would a dad do that? Well, the story is more complicated than we've been led to believe.
This is the letter that the Queen approved.
The letter that Granny and Pa urged her to write.
Someone suggested she write you a letter, and the Queen said that's a good idea.
Yes, but the Queen never read this letter because it was a horrible letter, very insulting and cruel.
But Thomas, why did you give it to the Daily Mail, part of it?
Because at the same time, People magazine were coming out with it, the fact that Meghan had shared with 6 other people, right?
So you didn't think it was any big deal?
No, that's not the point. I thought I have to get my side into this too. I put out a little part of it. The other things in the letter are so hateful and so cruel that I wouldn't put it out. And that's more protecting her than myself.
You've never seen Up?
No, dude.
Let's stop right
animated.
now. You go watch Up, and then we'll come back.
Come back.
Isn't that like an animated thing? Kind of.
Yeah,
good,
and it's
though.
awesome.
Yeah,
It's really good.
It's a great
Not the kind of stuff I watch. Not the kind of stuff I watch.
Great opening.
You got to go watch Up. You got to do it tonight.
Listen, as a body language piece, you have to watch Lux Jr., which is the first ever Pixar animation.
Yeah.
Really got me.
I don't watch much animation. It's just that.
It's a short.
Is that the lamp?
Yeah, it's a piece of genius. The moment I saw that, I was like, oh man, they've done it. They've done it. They've made you fall in love with an inanimate object. It's like it's genius. Total genius.
I'll mention again.
There you go.
Pyle has a new book based on that premise. Pyle has a new book based on that premise for children, specifically for children, to learn body language that's coming out on the 10th.
What's it called?
Hold on one second. I'll find the name of it.
Let's pitch it.
Yeah, for sure.
We are right now.
Exactly what we're doing while we talk. Come on, Jim. Where's your name? I got it right here.
Chase, where's your mug, man?
I keep forgetting it. I just told Michelle I want to keep it up here because I have a fridge and everything up here. I'm just going to keep it up here.
Keep it in the fridge. Keep it cold.
Mine's got water in it now. I drink all every
when it
week. I
comes
drink
out,
all
it's
my
like-
coffee, then I fill it up with water.
Now I got to find this. Hold on. He's sent it to some weird place.
Fascinated?
Wait, isn't it on Amazon pre-release?
Yes, it is. It's on Amazon pre-release, and it is called.
Can you get it on Kindle?
Not sure.
Check them. Let me get my Dr. Phil style iPad.
Okay,
out.
it is called. You can't see it on my screen. Probably Body Talk Animated, a big kids course in body language.
Does it have? Is it on?
And Marion Crench. I think it's in pre-sale. Is all I know. Yeah. It's in pre-sale on Amazon. Wow. Body Talk Animated.
Okay, well, I'm gonna get that.
Yeah.
And it'll be good too.
Oh yeah, yeah, and he's had a couple of. He told me today he was really excited. He had a couple of young people read the book, and they had it. When he was talking to them, they were talking about baseline and those words. I said, Jim, you're doing my heart
Were they
good.
really?
When you're teaching 10-year-olds baselining.
That's awesome.
That's hilarious. Good for him, man. Yeah. And he'll sell the squad out of it too.
There was nothing in that letter to be ashamed about. A daughter pleading with her father to behave decently. Meg stood by every word.
It was a mean letter, was it?
Yeah. I have the letter. I don't know what I could do with it. I've offered a lot of money for the letter. I'll burn it before I sell it.
Did Meghan give you a return address to write a letter back to her?
No. No.
Nothing?
No. It's pretty much a kiss-off. I think Harry should take the lead here and try to put us back together some way.
You think Harry should play the peacemaker?
I think he should. No.
All right. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to start off by saying, look, we have no idea what happened behind the scenes. We're not trying to project and say we know what happened between him and her. Not our business. What we're trying to do is read what we see, tell you what we see, and we rarely conjecture about what happened in the past. There's apparently baggage of some kind, or just out of the blue, somebody decided to jettison these folks. Let's not assume we know. One of the things that's interesting here is when they start talking, when he's talking, watch the body language of the siblings. Mark, this goes back to what you said last time. The daughter starts to shake her head no. At the same time, the father and the son are nodding yes. And then she looks over, she starts to purse her lips and she does that. And then she suddenly stops. All I would want to know is I would stop that interview and say, what were you thinking? And what did you want to say? Because something's up with her that's different from the rest of it. That's all I got. I'll just go there. Say, Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I think in some instances, there's a way we can say there's probably this or there's probably that.
Sure.
Meghan and Harry have resisted literally zero opportunity to talk about baggage and trauma and how victimized they've been. So you don't hear a whole lot of that. So it makes me think there may be, or there's maybe a likelihood of less being there. I'm speculating, of course, but I think that relationship in general, that marriage is kind of like a two-person cult. And I think you could probably tell who the leader of that cult might be. The malignancy and just narcissistic behavior is off the charts. And I think it's genuine. And I don't personally think that either one of them views themselves as having made mistakes or having done anything out of line or anything unreasonable. And I think they actually believe it. I don't think they're asking for an apology as a tactic. The family, I think they're genuinely believe that they're, the victims. And I think the other side believes that they're flawless victims. And I always wondered what it would be like if Amber Heard married Amber Heard. And I think I might know now.
The world would blow up. It's like antimatter and matter meet. It's over, man.
Not over until we get to pro tip number 8, the lack of empathy. People with malignant narcissism lack empathy and may not be connected with the emotional impacts of their actions on other people, including family members. And this kind of lack of empathy can lead to the person prioritizing their own needs and desires over theirs of a family, ultimately resulting in some kind of abandonment, denial of their absolute existence, maybe, hypothetically. Scott, what do you got?
All right. The dad's showing fairly strong illustrators, I think, with his hand as he's trying to get his feelings across. I know he's got, like I keep saying, as we all know, the neurological deficits he has. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but so I can't be positive about the veracity of the feelings that he's expressing. But my gut tells me that he really does feel bad about this. I think as a father, he feels like he's wronged his daughter and he's trying to correct it. I don't think he's going to be able to, but I think that's what we're seeing. So the emotion there, I think, even taking all the other stuff into consideration, my gut says it's real. I can't tell because of the problems he's got. I have to keep saying that. But I think it's real. I think he does feel bad about that. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so I agree. It's very, very possible, if not absolutely accurate, that he feels bad about this situation. That doesn't mean, though, that if somebody throws a ball, he isn't going to throw it back, and he won't even know he's done it until he's thrown it back. Because I think there may be a pattern here that says, hey, I can love my daughter, but if my kids throw balls, I will throw them back. Now, he says to the letter, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. We know that he can shrug both shoulders. And Greg, you've already seen him do a single shoulder shrug. So I'm concerned that when he says, I don't know what I'll do with it, he does two single shoulder shrugs, one at the start and one at the end. It suggests to me there's a possibility that he does know what he might do with it, a possibility that he does have an idea of some of the possibilities of what he could do with that letter. He says it's worth a lot of money, and people have asked for it. But he says that before that, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Well, then he contradicts himself and says, I'll burn it before I sell it. So selling it is an option. But he's saying, well, I would do this, I would burn it before I said it. But why? He could have just said that at the start. He could have said that at the start. Why does he need to do a double shoulder two single shoulder shrugs on, I don't know what I'll do with it? I think he's got some ideas what he might do. And I think the unfortunate thing is you have got somebody here who when a private message is sent, will give it to the Daily Mail. And once can be a pattern. And I can imagine he has some storylines in his head as to what would happen if he delivered the whole thing unredacted to the Daily Mail. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but I'm saying he has probably run it over in his head.
One of those tape replays.
There was nothing in that letter to be ashamed about. A daughter pleading with her father to behave decently. Meg stood by every word.
It was a mean letter, was it?
Yeah. I have the letter. I don't know what I could do with it. I've got a lot of money for the letter. I'll burn it before I sell it.
Did Meghan give you a return address to write a letter back to her?
No. No.
Nothing?
No. It's pretty much a kiss-off. I think Harry should take the lead here and try to put us back together some way.
You think Harry should play the peacemaker?
I think he should. No.
It is, after all, the first time they've sat down together to talk about how all three of them have been written out of Meghan's life. The only person she maintains contact with is her mother, Doria.
What happens if she loses Doria? Who's she going to have to turn to in the family that she hasn't thrown under the bus? So, like I said, a simple apology, and it doesn't have to be in public. It could be, but just get it over with and relieve yourself of all that stress.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because they're asking for an apology from Harry's side of the family.
For what?
I've had to make peace with the fact that probably never going to get genuine accountability or a genuine apology.
When you look at, in my opinion, what she and Harry have done, throwing everybody in the family, everybody in the royal family under the bus, doing Netflix, making $100 million, doing Spare, writing their own books. Who are the gold diggers?
So what do you say to the people who say that you came here, you made these multi-million-dollar deals, and that you were just money-grabbing royals?
Who are the opportunists of family name and of family stories and of photographs and of, come on, that's the pot calling the kettle at its ugliest.
Look, from my perspective, all I needed was enough money to be able to pay for security, to keep my family safe.
All right, Chase, what do you get? I'm just kidding, man. Okay. Sorry. All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I'll go. Look, I just picked up on this. I think it's interesting that the documentary is very clear that this is the first time they've ever sat down together to talk about this. Now, I was just asking the guys, have they lived apart? Did they live close? I mean, I don't have access to any of that information, nor does anybody else. I think that's just kind of interesting, that clearly this is, as Greg says, so it's a drama and it's important. Your sister's involved and there's some big, it's a big scene. It's like stuff keeps going to the Daily Mail. I'm really interested why they haven't got together beforehand and gone, are we going to sit down and talk about this thing? Because our sister's like, there's this whole thing going on. That kind of interests me. Okay. The brother seems to me resigned, but with a little bitterness around all of this and kind of highly incredulous, thinks it's kind of incredible what's going on here. Feels a lot calmer, but still bitterness, incredulous. But Chase, I think, as you were saying, has a different way of handling this situation to the sister, who is still angry and what I would call very exercised. There's a lot of energy in her around this, a lot of energy that needs to get itself out, just like, an exorcist will come and get that demon out of you, that focus, that thing that you are obsessed with. One seems a little bit more obsessive and energized around this. The other a little more resigned. So interesting as a family there. That's all I got on this one. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, what's interesting for me is this is almost like the Beatles being angry because Yoko Ono broke them up. That's what I think it feels like to me here. So we got three people who are sitting here saying she went away. Now, she, in this case, is far from John Lennon. It's the other way. She married John Lennon and broke him out of the Beatles, whatever you want to call it. But the whole feeling that there's some entitlement, like they all should be part of this and they're not, is what I'm feeling here as I pay attention to this. And when I say I'm paying attention to body language. When a brother shows concern and then lip compression as he does his confirmation nod around just an apology, I think that's what he wants. I think the sister, on the other hand, may have a very different opinion about what it takes to make up for this. The sister says, I love this, who are the gold diggers? That's not a positive defense. I didn't do anything. That's they did it too. And then when she says, if you want to listen for keywords, I always say words matter and word stressors matter. She's writing her own books. You ever say that? Her own books. We know that this sister has a book called Diary of the Princess Pushy's Sister. So she's pushed out a book that has something to do with that.
What's it called?
Yeah. Diary of Princess Pushy's Sister. Good one to try tongue twist, right? Yeah. So Anyway, yeah, that sounds like something you might find. Yeah. Anyway, so maybe she's got another book in there. Who knows? But that definite heavy emphasis on own books tells you this is, again, she's got stuff in her teeth too. That's the same argument again. Here we go. This is not a positive defense. This is a negative defense. This is a dramatic defense. Something goes wrong, it's your fault. So then you can pay attention to the brother. The other thing I'd say is watch that intake eye, that I think it's his left eye on this case, narrowing as I think he probably is not happy he came to this interview. You can see he's less and less comfortable as the interview goes on, where she gets more and more comfortable. Again, not a positive defense, a negative defense. And I think there's a bit of my entitlement's been violated. I should have been part of this whole thing, and they're not. Scott, what do you got?
All right. Yeah, I agree. The brother's still showing that the non-confident body language and that single shoulder shrug we see on him, and the head shake. I don't think he understands why she's not apologizing if there needs to be one. I don't think he understands why. So I think that bugs him. And we also, as much as we've seen, and we really don't have much of a baseline on him because he hadn't said that much so far. Just that one piece and a couple of little spots in there. So it's kind of tough to pick up on the things that he's doing that he doesn't normally do because we haven't seen him do much. So everything is odd at this point. Now the sister, when they show that little ha after the clip, this makes me feel, it hurts my feelings. It makes me feel so stupid because it's so much directing us in a specific situation, a specific direction by the people making the documentary. I don't like it when they do that. I like to see what's really happening, but they're playing to a story that they're creating a narrative to go to make it look like Meghan's all bad. I'm not taking up for her. I'm just saying they're reinforcing that at this point. And then let's see what else I got. Oh yeah, that squinted side eye. She squints and looks at the side eye like that. We usually do that when we know the answer and we're giving that person the information like they're supposed to come up with it or realize the answer themselves. But she knows the answer, and I think we all know or supposedly know the answer, and so does Ian. That's the feeling she's giving him as she goes along. And then we get back to her baseline, which is answering all of her questions and the same expressions that she's using the whole time, the big expressions, the small expressions, anger, frustration, and a little bit of extra face there at the end because she knows she's being filmed or videoed, but watch her through this whole thing. Pay attention because she's got that little extra face thing on her. She's always smiling like, oh, I'm being videoed, or I don't realize I'm being videoed. I'm just sitting here smiling and looking this way. Chase, what's it like to go at the end here?
I'm just going to give one little tip here. When someone's talking about an injury, so how somebody hurt them, how somebody did something wrong and hurt them, are they referring to it in a physical sense, an emotional sense, a social sense, or through the lens of ego? And you're seeing different ones start to play out here. Some are hurt socially, some have hurt ego, some are hurt, I would say, emotionally here. And then nobody's really discussing being insulted in physical terms yet. So we're just seeing those three start to show up.
One of those tape replays.
It is, after all, the first time they've sat down together to talk about how all three of them have been written out of Meghan's life. The only person she maintains contact with is her mother, Doria.
What happens if she loses Doria? Who's she going to have to turn to in the family that she hasn't thrown under the bus? So, like I said, a simple apology, and it doesn't have to be in public. It could be, but just get it over with and relieve yourself of all that stress.
Well, it's funny you should say that because they're asking for an apology from Harry's side of the family.
For what?
I've had to make peace with the fact that probably never going to get genuine accountability or a genuine apology.
When you look at, in my opinion, what she and Harry have done, throwing everybody in the family, everybody in the royal family under the bus, doing Netflix, making $100 million, doing Spare, writing their own books. Who are the gold diggers?
So what do you say to the people who say that you came here, you made these multi-million-dollar deals, and that you were just money-grabbing royals?
Who are the opportunists of family name and of family stories and of photographs and of, come on, that's the pot calling the kettle at its ugliest.
Look, from my perspective, all I needed was enough money to be able to pay for security, to keep my family safe.
So, when you look back at the last 3 to 5 years, do you think meeting Harry, being with Harry, marrying Harry, has improved your sister's behaviour, or do you think it's made it worse, the whole situation?
I think it's made it worse because I think he has personality profile that perfectly enables someone who is an alleged narcissist. Whether it's PTSD or his seeming neediness over his mother, his history of being somewhat rebellious in his own life as the younger child in their family, competing always with his brother William and never being happy. I mean, he has a similar personality in not only the rebellion, relying on substances to avoid accountability and real growth and responsibility. I think he's enabled her, and I don't think they're improving each other's lives. I think it's a toxic relationship because they're codependent.
I'm really proud of us. I'm so proud of my wife.
Would you like to talk to her? Now. Is it possible to put all that water under the bridge and have a chat to her?
I don't think she would do it without a motive. I don't think she's capable of empathy, remorse, or shame. I don't think she could feel enough to apologize.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, here we are. I can see her saying, I am glad you asked. Look at her wind her head around and get cocked into position. And then it's almost like a verbal tick in the very beginning where she says, well, since you asked, Mark, you always talk about people on their verbal tick. If you've ever had somebody who does that before they start, well, since you asked, you can see it that she's sitting there and she moves her mouth a little bit, but doesn't make the sound. Then she drops down, left, down, right, down, left, down, right. When you ask me to analyze somebody's personality or profile someone or Chase or any of us, we don't go, well, she goes to emotional accessing first. So that's her feelings about the situation. Then she drops down to internal voice. When you're interrogating somebody and you see that, they're getting ready to confess because they're going down to emotional and how it impacts them and how they should deal with it. When we analyze people, we don't do it from a distance and go, well, I think they're piece of. That's not what we do. It's not how we function, but it's what we're seeing here. There's also this feeling and evaluating a person for your own sake. When you start with how they affect you, you're going to skew it. It's just the nature of it. So we're very careful with that. Here's where I said, I think maybe she watches us because she does every possible qualifier that she can in this thing. Alleged narcissist. And then she's doing the personality profile. Then she gets into pontificating. She gets to deliver exactly how she feels. And I have down here on my notes, she's doing bad relationship bingo because she's talking about toxic and list it. You could just run down a list and Chase, I'm sure you've got them listed, but every one of those little statements she says as she pontificates. And then when she's asked, would you like to talk to her? Her expression changes and we see an expression we haven't seen yet. Go back, look at it and look at the elements of it and write them in the notes down below. But look at the difference in her face when she's asked if she would like to talk to Meghan. I don't think there's any chance she wanted to talk to her. I think this is about them batting something back and forth, throwing balls back and forth as the analogy he used. She doesn't answer the question. She goes back to her profiling skill. I think this is all about deep-seated baggage in a family, maybe a blended family, because this was the second wife and the daughter of the second wife. There's a whole lot of something that's happened behind the scenes here. We can't know. We can't know what it did to Meghan. We can't know, was Meghan the little princess? That might be the reason she's calling her that, not because she's Meghan the princess, but because she was special there. We don't have any idea how that happened, but we're sure seeing a train wreck of it playing out here and them throwing the ball back and forth. Chase, what do you got?
I think if the only person there is the dad who would just stand up and probably embrace Meghan if she walked in the door right there. I think he's willing to do that. I think he genuinely wants that to happen. But I want to bring your attention to one thing, and this is her behavior when the question is asked, would you talk to her now? And put all that water under the bridge. And she leans without a single pacifying gesture. Her blink rate slows down. She's comfortable actually pausing to consider the question for a minute. She goes into this emotional accessing, which when we look down to the right, we're most likely recalling some kind of emotional thought process. Then she blinks just one time. And during that blink, her shutter speed is extremely slow. And our shutter speed is the speed that our eyelid closes and then opens back up. If it's quick, we're minimizing the time that we're taking our eyes off of a target. If it's slow, there's some relaxation there. So I think this was probably rehearsed. It was definitely well read. I think it came out of this purple book that I have right here. It was actually in order. It was listed in order from this little purple book. But it was still, I think she genuinely, that her rehearsing it does not mean that it's not genuine and she doesn't believe those things. So let's move on to pro tip 9. Superiority, being admitted or accepted into a new social circle of much higher status. A malignant narcissist only proves to themselves that they were right the whole time. So things like an average family are things that remind her about who she really is, and they represent challenges not just to her appearance, but self-esteem, self-identity, of kind of superiority, which is all of this stuff we're talking about. All of us, anytime we talk about narcissists, we're talking about a disorder that may or may not be here, but that disorder is rooted in insecurity, the whole thing. That's all I got. Mark?
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in this one. The pause, would you talk to her? The pause is very long there. And I like your description there, Chase, of the blink. Feels very much to me like a slow blink of acceptance that's happening there. I think I'm going to think that what's going on in her mind there is she believes there is no hope of that ever happening. She just doesn't think that is ever likely to be, why even think about that? Because it's just never going to occur. I think, because if you thought it was going to occur and it was important to you, you would have rehearsed in your mind, how would that go? Where would that happen? How would that go? What would people say? You'll have a strategy around that because you'll think it's a possibility. I don't think she thinks it's a possibility. Now, let's go to her DSM bingo that goes on, which is fantastic. Now, although psychopath is not there as a diagnosis in the DSM, but it is mentioned, and she says, I don't think she's capable of empathy, remorse, or shame. She has upped the ante on narcissism now, and I think she's going for a very simplistic idea of, I think she's a psychopath. I think she's psycho. And I really think that is upping the ante on it. Now, for the husband, for Harry, I mean, it's just a great list. Needy, rebellious, damaged, competitive, unhappy, substance abuser, unaccountability, irresponsible. So look, I mean, that's just that is a melange, a trifle of all kinds of ideas, all at the same time, put in there, as far as I can see. Or she has done a incredible analysis and got a gestalt, a collection of many different personality disorders that she's kind of chucking in there. So I kind of go, well, is this a reasonable account that she's giving of these other human beings, or is it an account that comes out of anger? And I think she may have some of the elements accurate, but I think it's gone a bit too heavy. And it's maybe not fully accurate. It's maybe a little over dramatized here. Well, look, Harry was right to say, he needs security, because I think what she delivers there is a massive character assassination. I'm not saying some of it isn't accurate, because it clearly is, okay? But in that immensity that she delivers in that simplistic form, I don't think it's accurate, and I think it belies the anger that she has. Scott, what do you got on this one?
Right. And keep in mind, when we're talking about narcissism and comparing it with the psychopath, all narcissists aren't psychopaths, but all psychopaths are narcissists. So you can be a clinical, hardcore narcissist and not be a psychopath. And you can do some really rude stuff, what people a lot of times will refer to as a sociopath. But in real life, there are no sociopaths. Those are just hardcore criminals. Those are the people that end up stabbing people and doing really mean stuff to their kids and that kind of thing. Not that psychopaths don't do that sometimes as well, but let's Greg talked about balls earlier, and you talking about balls to bring that up and suggest that Meghan is a psychopath, which I think is what she's trying to do, or try to put her on that, go down that road, because she doesn't have any empathy or anything. Narcissists don't have any of that, but that's not where she's going with it. I think I agree with you, Mark. I think she's trying to go down that take a psychopath swing at her, and she's not at all, not one hallmark of psychopathy in Meghan that I've seen anyway, that I understand to be that. Anyway, so when Ian asks, would you like to talk to her now? When I watch these and start talking about the micro expressions and all that, I go through frame by frame and watch them. if you do this, if you download it or copy it or get a version of it, when you ask her that question, watch her face slowly. Her expression she has on her face slowly starts to go down. And it's hardly perceptible unless you go frame by frame, and you can watch it go down really slowly. Which is whether she's relaxing or whatever. I think what she's doing, she's thinking about how to say no. I agree with you again, Mark. She's trying. She wants to say no, but she doesn't know how to say no without and put her narrative that she wants to push forward at the same time. So she goes with a narrative that she's been pushing up this so far, so that she's been following. So that got on my nerves a little bit. And then after that, there's an edit. After she answers that question, it cuts to a close-up, and her mouth is already open. There's a dramatic change in color, and she's not moved much. It could only be a few seconds, but we're not seeing the entire answer there. That's what bothers me. Again, with the editing on this thing, they're trying to push us down a specific road. So when they cut from the end of that question before they cut to the close-up of her, the colors change. They get brighter, and her mouth is already open and she's already answering, where the other one, her mouth is closed. Just a frame before that, her mouth is closed. And that's not enough time to get your mouth open and start talking, that one frame. So I don't feel good about that answer being intact. I don't think we're seeing the whole thing. And that's all I'll say about that. You notice I haven't said anything about the lean-ins.
Yeah, I noticed.
Hey, you guys go.
One of those tape replays.
So, when you look back at the last 3 to 5 years, do you think meeting Harry, being with Harry, marrying Harry, has improved your sister's behaviour, or do you think it's made it worse, the whole situation?
I think it's made it worse because I think he has personality profile that perfectly enables someone who is an alleged narcissist. Whether it's PTSD or his seeming neediness over his mother, his history of being somewhat rebellious in his own life as the younger child in their family, competing always with his brother William and never being happy. I mean, he has a similar personality in not only the rebellion, relying on substances to avoid accountability and real growth and responsibility. I mean, I think he's enabled her, and I don't think they're improving each other's lives. I think it's a toxic relationship because they're codependent.
I'm really proud of us, you know. I'm so proud of my wife.
Would you like to talk to her? Now. Is it possible to put all that water under the bridge and have a chat to her?
I don't think she would do it without a motive. I don't think she's capable of empathy, remorse, or shame. I don't think she could feel enough to apologize.
How do you now manage to cope with the idea that you've effectively been cut off?
Tell me. You tell me how I deal with it. I can't answer that question.
Well, it's just impossibly sad, isn't it?
Yes.
From a father's perspective.
Yeah. It's a huge disappointment, and it's sad every day.
What about those grandchildren?
I would love to see them. I would love to see them.
Archie and Lily, but...
Yeah.
You'd like to at least...
They're going to have my nose. They're going to have my eyes. I know.
If Meghan was here now, what would you say to her?
Let's go somewhere and talk. And I say, what's wrong? What? How can I fix this? How can I fix this? Of course, I love you. And the bottom line, Harry, nice guy. I love you for marrying my daughter. Meg, I love you. I love my grandchildren. I'd love to see them. I'm open to any kind of conversation. Thank you.
All right. I'll go first on this one. I think he's realizing there's no hope to fixing this relationship. I don't think there is. I think she's too far gone, and he went too far in the wrong direction when all this stuff started happening. And I think his approach to it wasn't something a father should take. He's taking that approach now as he's saying these things, but because I feel so sorry for him, taking his neurological deficits into consideration, it feels like this is real. I think he really feels that way. I think he is sad. I think he wants to connect with her. He's all of his facial expressions, as limited as they are, you're seeing those things that tell us he's sad. We're seeing the things in the brow we should see. We're seeing the thing in the mouth and the face we should see. They're really small, but they're there. And I really think he's trying to, he's saying what he should have said at the beginning when all this started. And I think it might be a little bit too little too late right now. But I believe him, and I feel sorry for this guy. I think that's really sad. Chase, what do you got?
I'm going to go long, and I won't apologize for it for the first time ever. This is.
I'll get my mug of hot coffee.
Hang on.
Two-handed. This is honest, genuine, loving, and not one shred of fakery, false motives, deception, or misleading words. This is a man who sees his family, I think, before he sees anything royal. He sees a daughter first and then the royal family. I think he sees family first. He's not obsessed with status and hierarchy. He's just focused on his family. He doesn't care. I don't think he cares about social standing and climbing and all of that. And as an example, questions drive our focus, all of our focus. The little silent questions we have in our head drive about 100% of what we see and what we focus on. And if I told you to pause the video right now and search the place that you're at right now and find everything you can that's orange, you could do it. And if I gave you 15 seconds and said, all right, stop. And then when I asked you how many blue things there were, you wouldn't have seen most of them. Your internal question of what's orange drove the focus, but it also determined what's important and what to delete from your working memory. And in this case, you're seeing a father who has an internal questions of, what can I do to fix things with my daughter? How can I bring my family together? How can I make this right? And probably has some medical bills. I'm just going to throw that in there. And a daughter of his asking, how will this situation benefit my social status, my social standing, and what will I gain from this socially? What will I gain from this economically? So in your life, think of the internal questions that you might be asking. Things like, how can I get them to know what they're doing wrong? Might be less useful than, how can I repair this relationship? Or how can we get back to common ground? Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, a couple of things. So let's first start by saying, yes, I do think we're seeing genuine emotion here. And there are a few reasons. I see real emotion. Doesn't mean he's right in how he got here. Look, a lot of people do things that are wrong, get them into a bad place, and then they are trying to fix it or do something that's right. Let's add to that. It's clear this guy's on his last leg. I mean, whatever his last leg is, if it's years, days, months, weeks, we don't know. But when people get to that point, they get to what I call fatalistic. You know, you go through a life cycle. I've got a whole book I've worked on that's almost ready that has fatalistic as a last step. And that means I'm in glide path, but I need to fix those last things, whatever they were that I couldn't fix. So we all want to fix those things. And you could be the most, unless you're just a psychopath who has no feeling for other people, you're going to feel that. So let's just say that. It doesn't mean he's perfect and doesn't mean he's right, but means he is truly feeling emotion. He's got a condemning down face with this chin down and some anger when he says, how can I fix this? That's helplessness in this case, not anger at the person, anger at the situation. One shoulder up as he addresses, how can I fix this? Again, interesting. The reason I think this is real is because the last thing he does is when he is saying, how can I fix this? He's mugging for the camera. And I think he's facing that camera, not thinking about himself. I think he's thinking, this she may see. This I can push to her. Whereas he can't probably write her a letter, get her on the phone, or do any of that. And if you don't think that's true, pay attention. Watch him as he finishes saying that, set his lips in a way we haven't seen to now, and his eyes slightly smile. They actually lighten up as opposed to the dark heaviness of when he is saying, how can I fix this? I think he thinks he's gotten this message onto tape, onto video. That might be the whole purpose of this thing. It might be he is the genesis of this and why they haven't gotten together. Maybe he needed both of these people here to make this thing happen. Don't know, but that's what I'm seeing. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, good. I think that's a good analysis. I agree that he is. That smile is one of a real light in his eyes, some real pleasure. I think at the possibility that this could come right, that a meeting could happen. At the same time, how can I fix it? Very pronounced single shoulder shrug, I think, which kind of suggests there's a strong feeling that he maybe can't fix it, that it's not fixable at this point. I agree, Greg, that there is something fatalistic about him at this point, either fatalistic or territorial. So this could go two ways. I agree with everybody that this is real, true sorrow, emotion. I checked it out by turning off that music that Ian and his team, that Michael Nyman music that Ian and his team had put there, just in case you weren't sad. That'll definitely make you sad. And I switched that off and watched again, and all the signals were there. The music didn't have to do any of the work. Though beautiful music, well, beautiful-ish. I mean, yeah, beautiful. I mean, you know, probably what it cost them for that, not having to employ Michael Nyman to do it. It's not bad. Anyway, he says about the grandchildren, they're going to have my nose, they're going to have my eyes, I know. So, Greg, that is either legacy, that's either a talk about fatalistic, like I'm leaving my DNA behind, that is my DNA there, or it could be territorial in that those are mine and I should see them because I have ownership of that nose, those eyes. I know they're my ownership. I don't know quite which way to go on that one. I like your fatalistic legacy idea there, Greg. At the same time, I'm still quite open to the idea that there is in him this throw the ball and he will throw it back. You throw something into his territory and he will try for a bigger ball back. You know, it's a strong possibility with this guy, and that he can't get himself out of that pattern. Even when talking about his grandchildren, he has to have some ownership, some kind of territory over it. That's all I got on that one.
One of those tape replays.
How do you now manage to cope with the idea that you've effectively been cut off?
Tell me. You tell me how I deal with it. I can't answer that question.
Well, it's just impossibly sad, isn't it?
Yes.
From a father's perspective.
Yeah. It's a huge disappointment, and it's sad every day.
What about those grandchildren?
I would love to see them. I would love to see them.
Archie and Lilibet.
Yeah.
You'd like to at least...
They're going to have my nose. They're going to have my eyes. I know.
If Meghan was here now, what would you say to her?
Let's go somewhere and talk. And I say, what's wrong? What? How can I fix this? How can I fix this? Of course, I love you. And the bottom line, Harry, nice guy. I love you for marrying my daughter, Meg. I love you. I love my grandchildren. I love to see them. I'm open to any kind of conversation. Thank you.
Just one more thing.
All right, Mark, up to this point, what have you seen? What do you think about what's going on?
You know, I want to focus on Ian because I do love him. I think he's fantastic. I like an Australian as much as the next man, or woman. And so what I love about him, and I'm going to use it myself, is that idea of I've got a proposition for you, and then just a complete smack round the face, just wholly aggressive with the questioning. Has he ever interviewed Anna Delvey? Has he?
Yes, this was him. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those
my favorite video.
They're made for each other, aren't they? Those two. I do enjoy an interview with Ian. Chase, what do you got?
Well, since we didn't get all the way, we're going to move to pro tip 10. The malignant narcissist has some insecurities that govern almost all of her behavior. And the trouble is that the insecurities are locked in a basement, and not even the narcissist can see them most times. So every action they take is to move further away from insecurity. And I want you to remember this. If you observe their behavior, you can trace that behavior backwards. Trace it and just to avoiding information, situations, connections that threaten self-image, self-esteem, and self-worth. So when you view it this way, you can trace the path of the narcissist backward to identify every insecurity they have, because every path is directly away from that. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so let's first talk about what people hate the most. People hate the most the things that they find as weaknesses in themselves. So, for example, if I have a problem and you have a problem, I'm probably going to hate that more than I would the other way. What I'm seeing here with this is three different approaches to this woman. First is angry. Is that justified or not? What caused it? No idea. And then second is hurt. Is that justified or not? Have no idea. We can't see that. We can only see that the symptoms of what we're looking at. And then the last one is wanting reconciliation, whether that's for good purpose or bad purpose, whether it's justified or not, can't tell. People are made up of purposes and drives and beliefs, and then they interpret everything they see, and that creates behaviors that we read. That's all we're seeing, guys. So this could be an absolute monster of a family who created an absolute something else, monster of another person, and they could all be angry and throwing the ball at each other, and none of them justified, or it could be somewhere in the middle. Can't tell. What we're doing is reading symptoms. Scott, what are you saying?
I think this is a great study in watching two different families handle the same problem differently. Like I was saying at the beginning, you're seeing Meghan's family handle the same problem as the royal family, and the differences in how they're handled, and how you might go into this like I did, thinking, you know what, man, I think I'm going to like these people more than I'm going to like these people, like Meghan and them. But now I'm not too sure. I think I like Meghan more than I like her family. You know, I feel sorry for the father and all that. I really do. That's too bad. But I get it now. I see where she came from, and I can see why she's like that, or I understand it better. Not that I like her any more than that, any more than I did coming into this, but I definitely, when you go to weighing the two, I think I like her a little bit more than I like them. And that has nothing to do with body language. That's just what I think, man. All right, fellas, I think this is another good one, and we'll see you next time.
See you.
The behavior panel.
You're a psychopath.
I'm going to invite us, Scott. I'm going to invite us, Scott, to my Anna Delvey party. We can have Anna. We'll have.
Yeah, there you
Meghan.
go. Yeah.
Like, they're all coming to the party.
Well, one of them has a hell of a PR machine behind her too. The other one doesn't.
Yeah, if you can talk her into it, if we could get her in somehow.
I'm very persuasive. I'm very persuasive.
Anna Delvey, just call her and invite her. She'll show up.
When I was cracking up a second ago, like right after I did my thing, when I was cracking up, I thought I had a really cool mic drop moment, and then I was scanning all three of you for some kind of like approval. was
nothing.
I wonder what you were laughing about, because I started laughing too. I was trying.
I was wondering. I was like,
if you get shits and giggles,
I thought I had a good moment. I thought one of y'all was just maybe a nod, maybe an eyebrow raise, a nod.
I'll do it for you now.
We're a dark lot. We're the wrong guys for that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Let me write that down. Hang on. What was that?
You should dub it back in, Scott. We can all go.
Yeah. Okay, ready? Let's go.
Yep.
Okay.
Just one more thing.
Because every path is directly away from that.
That's beautiful.
How's that?
Thanks, guys. Greg, what do you got?
So what do you got?